Where is this?
Ah! Okay, yeah, fine.
No, but seriously, this is a question I get asked quite a bit. And as much as I would like to imagine it's Batman interrogating me, asking me where this field is, chances are it's just an airsofter looking to play at a place that he thought was pretty cool. So instead of demeaning these people, or just saying just Google it or go on Facebook, I've compiled a dedicated list going over all the airsoft fields that I know of in Western Washington. This is by no means a complete list, so if there is a couple fields that I'm missing, be sure to let me know in those comments below, but I think I've covered most of the fields here. Another thing to note about Western Washington Airsoft is that most of the games are hosted and shown on Facebook. This is going to be your number one resource for finding when new airsoft games are afoot, when they're happening, and all that good jazz. If you don't like Facebook, sorry, there is a couple pages that post some stuff on, say, Meetup, but it is fairly uncommon. Another thing to note about Western Washington Airsoft fields is that a lot of them aren't week to week. There's really only 2 that are week to week. The rest are usually going to be monthly, or heck, even rarer than that, and sometimes it's up to 3 or 4 months that you'll be waiting for that airsoft field to drop a game. But without further ado, let's dive right into my list of 11 airsoft fields in Western Washington. And to start things out, we're going to be taking a look at South Sound Airsoft. South Sound is a great field for beginners just because it has an awesome staff behind it and an awesome, super welcoming community. They just opened their new field. It looks to be set at kind of a sort of tree farm thing, so I'd imagine you'll want to bring your long-range guns, so think DMRs, snipers, stuff like that, but it's still going to be a great place to start out on your airsoft journey, especially if you happen to be down south, like the name implies. Next up is the Pacific Northwest Airsoft Field. The PNW Airsoft Field is ran by the guys over at Reaper Supply, and it's a pretty fun field if you can take the hike up to the top objective. For that field specifically, you're going to want to bring a backpack so you can take all your gear, your BBs, your air, all that jazz, and bring it up top to the field with you. And that is because there's a very steep incline between the base where you park and the top field. Up at the top of this field, you'll find some urban mixed with some forested environments. It is actually a pretty tight field, so I'd probably recommend those mid-range guns for you. Alright, next up on the list is TAC. TAC is the premier and only indoor location in all of Western Washington that offers CQB gameplay. Now, the other thing about TAC is that TAC also runs games that aren't on the weekend, so it might be a viable option for you if you're looking for games that aren't, well, on the weekend. Say if you work the weekend days or stuff like that. Another great benefit to TAC is that CQB gameplay is a lot of fun if you've never done it before, and I would recommend checking it out if you haven't. Another thing to note is that they are kind of strict on their BB rules there, at least last time I visited, so you'll want to go in knowing that you might have to buy their BBs as well. Alright, next up on our field list is going to be Taags. Now, before the pandemic, Taags used to host some of the largest games in the area, with over 100 players attending each game. Now, moving on from that, Taags has actually started to recover and start to get games going once again. I do know these games aren't quite as large scale as they used to be before, but recently they had an event where they even brought a vehicle out that was military and they had objectives playing around that, so it looks like they're doing a lot of really fun things. One thing I do know about TAC for certain, though, is that there is a lot of brush and brambles, so you might want to bring out those LMGs, because yes, this field uses milsim weapon classifications if you ever wanted to try that. So LMGs are going to have a good advantage there, as well as DMR setups, because pretty much everyone's limited to semi-auto except for the LMGs. Still though, Taags does know how to put a good game together, so check them out when they have games available. Next up is going to be the only free airsoft field in all of Western Washington, and that's going to be Auburn Airsoft. Now Auburn Airsoft is pretty cool because it has some of the longest range engagements I think I've encountered, so this is a perfect place to break out that sniper rifle and that DMR. I would definitely not bring a medium range engagement gun to this field as you're going to struggle. The other thing to note about Auburn Airsoft is that it is down a big long trail, and the parking is pretty far away from the actual game location, so you'll want to pack a bit of a rucksack with all your BB slinging needs, as well as hydration and food if you plan on going to this field. Games, I think, are hosted roughly every week, but it is kind of dependent on who decides to show up for that week, so your mileage may vary. I would also recommend sunny days, as that seems to be the best times to encounter loads of players there. Next up is a field that's a little bit of a mystery to me, if I'm being honest, and that's going to be the CQB Fight Club down in Port Orchard, Washington. Haven't had the chance to go, haven't seen many pictures from their events, but best as I can tell, it's going to be an outdoor, urban, CQB-ish style game day, so you might want to bring a lower muzzle velocity gun, just so you can fit within their FPS limits. And after that is going to be one of my favorite fields, and that is forest fire. And the reason forest fire is one of my favorite fields is because it seems to be perfect for being able to try out almost any style of gun. You can run CQB, you can run mid-range, and you can definitely run long-range at this field. The only thing about forest fire is that it is very muddy late into the year. So you're going to want to bring those mud-proof boots. So, I mean, honestly, a big pair of rubber boots would probably be perfect. It can get quite messy out there on the field. But if you're willing to endure and get through all that dirt and mud and stuff, you'll get some excellent flanks that people won't see coming because people don't want to go in the mud. Highly recommend Forest Fire. They also got a robust rental program if you are in need of that. So they got plenty of AEGs for you to give Airsoft a try if you're a newcomer to the sport. All right, and next up is also going to be one of my two favorite fields in the area, and that's going to be Airsoft Acres. Now, Airsoft Acres has gone through a couple of management shifts, I'll call it. The other great thing about Paintball Station is that it's pretty much the only field out there that I can think of that's truly urban. And what I mean by urban is you still have some of that hard cover-to-cover style gameplay like in a CQB environment, but it involves long range, so you can still use some of those longer range abilities of your gun. I'd really recommend using a mid-range rifle or a long-range rifle at this field, and you can get some good use out of both of those. Finally, Paintball Station does have a bit of a robust back forest section, but it's not something I think everyone comes to that field for. It's a lot of fun, and I do highly recommend it. All right, next up is the Valley TAC Field. Cool thing about Valley TAC is it's run by the guys that are responsible for the Mag Dump podcast, so if you're wanting to meet them, chances are at least a couple of them will be there from time to time. Another good thing about the Valley TAC Field is that it is actually sort of like what I would call outdoor woodland CQB. During the summer months when the brush is really, really tall, it's very, very dense and people can't quite worm their way into the brush. So what that means is that it plays a lot like a CQB field. I was actually quite surprised when I went out there. I was expecting to have to use a lot of long range, but I was actually pleasantly surprised to find out mid and even short range guns work quite well there. So make sure you're bringing those if you ever plan on attending. I do have a sneaking suspicion, though, the field will play a lot different once the brush thins out during the wintertime, but I haven't quite gone there yet during the winter to know. All right, next up on our list is the Mill. Now, the Mill is a bit of a unicorn when it pops up online. Sometimes they host games, but usually it's pretty infrequently. Think maybe once every 3 to 4 months for some context there. But the Mill is pretty cool because it gives you a very post-apocalyptic vibe because it is taking place at an abandoned sawmill. Now, from the gameplay, it does look like you could push up and run up, but surprisingly, the field is actually very long range. I think a DMR is honestly probably the perfect setup there. Moving on from that, though, maybe an LMG if they have LMG FPS limits that are a little bit higher. But past that, I would really recommend a sniper, a DMR, something like that, so you can adequately engage people at those longer ranges. Another thing, too, is that oftentimes there's elevated sections on the field, like very small trails and stuff, that you will have to engage with people with because it is just a powerful spot to be, and you do have to balance that factor out. So I really recommend, like I said, those long-range guns. All right, and rounding out our list is going to be the final field known as Spray and Pray. This is a field that I haven't been to and I don't know a lot about personally. However, they do seem to have a pretty dedicated fan following on their Facebook page where I do see events posted on a regular basis, maybe once a month, maybe 2 times a month, something like that. From what I can tell in the pictures, it looks like a lot of their field is comprised of barricades, it's comprised of woodland features, so go in expecting that. Best guess is to run a mid-range gun, because that's usually the best thing to run if you don't know if it's a long-range field or a short-range field. Anyone that knows a little bit better than me is welcome to comment down below and let me know if Spray and Pray's field is better suited to different kinds of engagement distances. Alright, and that's mostly going to wrap up all the fields I have in our area. I'm sure there might be 1 or 2 that I missed. If you know of those, comment down below. But for the most part, I think that's it. Now, one of the things I really like about the Pacific Northwest region is the community. A lot of people you'll see going from one game to another game, or you'll catch people in photos, you'll be like, hey, I recognize that guy on the online community posts. It's really, really cool, honestly, and it's one of the better things about our area that I find to be really enjoyable. Best I can tell from places like California or other locations is that a lot more of those airsoft fields are kind of a lot more public, I guess, in that you're a lot less likely to run into the same person time after time after time. And it seems to be a bit more open to the public. But that's going to wrap things up for today, guys. Have a great day. Don't be a cheater. And that's all, folks.